information about elections from trusted sources, like our office, like counties, like cities, like others who are actually administering elections. It's also why we will continue to shine a light on the many safeguards in Minnesota before, during, and after elections that demonstrate the integrity of the process and the system. I'm joined here by some leaders of our team in the Office of Secretary of State, each of whom will be able to share specifics about what our office is doing to prepare for the 2024 election year. They oversee people with many decades of experience providing peace of mind for Minnesota voters. We have with us Bill Ekblad, our security navigator. He's been in that role since 2019. He came to us after a distinguished career as a naval officer with a background in cyber issues, including intelligence experience. We have David Maeda, our state elections director. Also, he has served in that capacity since 2019. He came to us after many years as an election administrator, most recently in the city of Minnetonka. We have with us Melanie Hazelip, our director of voter outreach since 2022. Before joining our office, she had a variety of outreach-related leadership roles. I'm going to hand it over to them shortly, but first I want to talk a little bit about the presidential primary, since that's what's coming up next in front of us in terms of the voting calendar. This will be, of course, Minnesota's second presidential primary of the modern era. So I want to refresh everyone on the basics. The primary will be on March 5th. We are part of what is known as Super Tuesday, one of 16 states that will hold their presidential nominating contests on the same day. But tomorrow, Friday, January 19th, is when Minnesotans will first be able to cast their ballots early by voting absentee in that contest. So it's March 5th, Tuesday, March 5th, but starting tomorrow, we are literally on the eve, that's when voting starts in that contest. And a reminder for folks, there is only one contest in this primary. It's President of the United States, and you'll have to choose whether you want a Republican Party ballot, a DFL Party ballot, or a Legal Marijuana Now Party ballot. And if you choose to vote as soon as tomorrow, or at any date between tomorrow and March 5th, if you choose to vote absentee, of course there are two main ways to do that. One is that you can do that in person at a local election office, typically a city or county facility, or you can request that a ballot be mailed to you, and you can vote from home, from the comfort of your kitchen table, for example. And just a reminder that voting from home is highly secure, because in Minnesota, we have 3 layers of security above and beyond in-person voting. Not many states do. First, when you order the ballot, when you order that absentee ballot to come to you in this election or any election in Minnesota, you have to provide some personal identifying information. It can be part of a social security number, it can be a driver's license number, and so forth. Second, you have to sign one of the envelopes that you return the ballot in. Third, you have to get a witness to sign as well. So those are 3 things, and only if all 3 of those things are intact when the ballot is mailed back or returned in person back. Only if all 3 are there. Namely, you've got the same personal identifying information that the intended voter used when that person ordered the ballot, and the voter signs, and a witness signs. Unless all 3 of those things are there, it will not be counted. So those are the security precautions that we've taken for a number of years, and that's why the system has worked so well in Minnesota. So, another reminder that you can track your ballot throughout the process, just like an Amazon or UPS package, so you don't have to wonder whether it's been received or wonder whether it's been counted, and that's another feature that puts us in a good place in Minnesota. Our website explains the process. You can go there and request that ballot now. That website is mnvotes.gov. And remember that the presidential nominating primary will feature the same general security procedures that apply in every election in Minnesota. It's no different. So before the election, for example, administrators must test the elections equipment, the tabulating equipment, multiple times, including in a prearranged, pre-noticed public meeting called a public accuracy test, where anyone off the street can come in and watch. You don't need to be a big shot. You don't need to be a VIP. You don't need an engraved invitation. Anyone can come into any one of these and watch the elections administrators literally try to trick the machines. That's what it's all about. Try to find the defects. Try to find flaws in the machines. And only if those machines pass the test are they able to be used in the upcoming election. This is no different. So that's what goes on in Minnesota, just as an example. Before I hand off the microphone, I want to say a word about an emerging topic, certainly emerging since the last election in 2022 even, and that's artificial artificial intelligence. It's a concern. It's a concern of a lot of people, me included. AI is not so much a new threat to elections or election security, but it is a way to amplify the existing threats, like disinformation. Deepfake video and audio images are here. They are not some far-off future creation. They are here very much right now, and they can be very, very convincing. In Minnesota, we're ahead of the curve because the legislature last session in 2023 saw fit to pass a law making it unlawful within 90 days of an election to disseminate a deepfake image without the consent of the depicted person if the deepfake is made with the intent to influence an election. The law is a way to plant a flag, to create a standard. I think it's a starting point, not an ending point. But in any event, we've already been working with our partners on identifying and responding to these kinds of threats. And speaking of that, I'm now going to hand it over to Bill Ekblad, our security navigator, to talk more about how we're thinking, not just about AI from an election security standpoint, but more broadly, how we're working with federal, state, and local partners on election security matters. Bill, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Good morning. We are indeed, as Secretary Simon mentioned, on the eve of Minnesota's 2024 presidential election season. But the relationships that we have with Minnesota local election leaders and our state and federal partners are continual and ongoing relationships that are primed and ready to go for what we expect to be an exciting and eventful election year ahead. Many of you are aware that 2016 was sort of a turning point in election security. That's when we started to see foreign cyber adversaries express an interest in infiltrating and intruding and interfering with U.S. elections and really cast a bright spotlight on all things related to election security. Since that election cycle, we have seen other concerns be added to that list to include mis- and disinformation within the elections environment. We've seen the rise of concern over physical security for poll workers and polling places and election processes. And as Secretary Simon mentioned, artificial intelligence is the latest thing to start to creep into the list of concerns for protecting and securing elections. So as this list has grown, we have worked with our local and federal state partners to focus on a couple of key central things that we think are valuable for whatever the threat environment might hold in the year ahead. First and foremost among them, communication. We work to emphasize to all of our partners to talk, see something, say something, communicate up, down, sideways about anything they see. Perhaps it's a threat that they recognize and can identify, and it would be beneficial for a neighboring county, for example, to be aware of what they're dealing with. Or maybe it's something they don't know what they're looking at. Maybe it's just a tiny piece of data that fits into a larger puzzle that we can work with our partners to help assimilate and correlate to what's really going on. So communication first and foremost. Sharing awareness of known threats is another key tenet. So as we learn things from our partners, we're making sure that we're passing those down and encouraging our local election leaders to pass those down further so that we all have shared situational awareness over what's going on. A key part of staying ahead of any threats that come up. And also making sure that all of our local election partners are aware of available resources that they can call upon. There is a lot of help out there for local election officials. Federal partners, state partners, nonprofits, academics, everyone wants to see elections protected for all the right reasons. And so it really becomes a challenge to make sure that everyone is aware of what they could be asking for and knows how to ask for it. Towards that end, last week, some of you may be aware, we gathered together with 50 Minnesota County election leadership teams, IT leaders from those counties, as well as with our state and federal partners at a tabletop exercise up at Camp Ripley. We spent a half day going through a series of pretty rigorous scenarios that were crafted by one of our federal partners to tease out some of the concerns and thought processes that will be beneficial for overcoming challenges in the year ahead. The group got a lot out of it. They had a chance to talk through sticky situations that hopefully none of us will ever see, but it offered a chance again to sort of emphasize those points of collaboration, communication, knowing what help is available, and keeping up with threats as we learn about them. So with that, we feel that we are as best positioned as we can be as we start, as I said, an eventful election year, and we think we're as ready as we can be. And with that, I will turn it over to our state elections director, David Maeda.
Thank you, Bill, and good morning, everybody. I was able to attend the tabletop exercise Bill just mentioned, and it was a great reminder that the people that get into this profession are really dedicated and understand the importance of every piece that goes into running a fair, accurate, and secure election. But it was also a reminder that none of us could do our jobs without the 30,000 election judges that are going to be needed this fall to run our polling places in Minnesota. And whenever I'm asked, how do I know we run fair, accurate, and secure elections in Minnesota, I point to the fact of the 30,000 Minnesotans who serve every election in running our polling places, making sure everything on election day runs smoothly. These people are our neighbors, our friends, and our family, and they're trusted members of our community. So it's great that we are able to enlist so many people to run our elections in Minnesota. Our state requires a party balance of election judges, so there are Republicans, Democrats, and legal marijuana now election judges in our polling places, but they really do leave their partisanship at the door, because when you come together as a team in a polling place, you want to make sure that the day runs smoothly and that all voters are treated fairly and equally. One of the things I miss about working in the city of Minnetonka is working with such a great group of election judges. Because Minnetonka had city elections and odd years, we had elections every year, and we had a dedicated group of people that would come back and serve the community every election cycle. I'll highlight one of them. Her name was Bonnie Carlson. Bonnie was one of our head election judges, but she was also instrumental in our running absentee voting in City Hall. She'd show up the 46th day before the election. Oftentimes in absentee voting, it's very slow at the beginning. People tend to want to wait till closer to election day to vote. So Bonnie would be sitting in a conference room getting a lot of reading done starting on the 46th day. But she was so diligent and dedicated, and every time an issue came up, she came to me and we figured out how to solve the issue. And she wasn't an exception in Minnetonka. She was an example of many people in the community that served as election judges. And I can guarantee you there are Bonnie Carlsons in every community in Minnesota. There are so many dedicated folks that make sure our elections run well. In 2020, Secretary Simon and I had concern about having enough people serve as poll workers because of the pandemic. And so our office did a lot more outreach than we normally do. We didn't end up having a shortage, and again, that goes to the dedication of so many Minnesotans. But every election, we do ask people to step up and serve as election judges. My first success story of 2024 happened this week. I'm a Minnesota Timberwolves season ticket holder, and my season ticket member reached out to me and said I inspired her to sign up to be an election judge for the first time this year. She said she's going to reach out to her colleagues and friends to also serve as election judges. So my work for 2024 is done. Just kidding. So I did tell Chloe, my representative, that I think she'll find the work really rewarding. I hark back to 2020. One of the companies we reached out to was Thomson Reuters. And I remember getting an email after the general election from one of the people that heard our spiel and said she's a lifetime election judge. She just thought the day went fabulously. It was fascinating work. To become an election judge in Minnesota, you have to be an eligible voter. You have to be able to read, write, and speak English. The election judges are hired at the local level. So if you're interested in becoming an election judge, people should reach out to their local election office. We also allow high school students to serve as election judges. That's one of my major successes in Minnetonka, was standing up a high school election judge program. We did it when we were implementing electronic poll books, so we had new technology in the polling places, and kids that had used iPads their entire life were great at helping some of our more senior election judges understand the new technology. So I highly encourage high school students that are interested in the process to sign up to be election judges. I wish I had known about it when I was in high school, because I would have been right there at the front of the line. We are living in a supercharged political environment, and so I think it's really important that anybody skeptical about how fair our elections are, sign up to be election judges. Learn about everything that we have in place to safeguard our elections. We did that in Minnetonka. Some of those people that came in as skeptics became our biggest cheerleaders, because they saw all the pieces that go into administering an election. Thankfully, the legislature, one of the new election laws that was passed this year, creates criminal penalties for those who try to intimidate or interfere with election workers. And so there are some protections built in this team with the physical security of our polling places, along with this election law. Hopefully it'll allow everybody to feel safe on election day. So my message this morning is that election administration really is a teamwork, not only with our county, city, and federal partners, township partners, state partners, but also the 30,000 Minnesotans who serve every election year. I think it's really, truly is the great Minnesota get-together. And with that, I will turn it over to our outreach director, Melanie Hazelip.
Thank you, David. Minnesota has a proud tradition of high voter turnout. In fact, we've been #1 in voter turnout for 3 out of the last 4 elections, including being #1 for the last presidential election. I really want to get us back to #1, and I know we can do it, but we need help from voters and from you all to get these messages out to the Minnesotans. I'm here to talk about a couple of new laws that are on the books and some of the outreach efforts from our office. First is pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds. As of June of 2023, 16 and 17-year-olds can now pre-register to vote. So they would use the same process that any voter would use, mnvotes.gov, or the paper ballot application, and pre-register. Their information gets sent to the statewide voter registration system where it's vetted, and as long as they're otherwise eligible, so a Minnesota citizen, a Minnesota resident, and a United States citizen, their information is entered into a queue where then on their 18th birthday, it's activated and they're ready to vote. They don't need to do anything else. It's a great way to get our youngest voters thinking of themselves as voters before they even turn 18. And studies have shown that when a person votes at age 18, they're more likely to become a lifelong voter, which is what we want. Next are the language access provisions that will be in place for the 2024 elections. So in all precincts across the state, voter instructions will be made available in the 3 most commonly spoken languages, which are Somali, Hmong, and Spanish. And for precincts that reach a threshold of at least 3% of voters speaking English less than very well, they will also have that language available for sample ballots and voter instructions. And then precincts that reach a 20% threshold of voters speaking English less than very well, they'll have actual interpreter services in those polling places. So we're hoping that it'll make the process a little more accessible for the many Minnesotans who don't speak English as their native language. Our elections team has been working really closely with the counties all across the state and the state demographer's office using Census Data Tract to make sure that they know which precincts to provide these services for. Secretary Simon and I met with dozens of community groups this week, letting them know about the new services that were provided for the folks in their communities. We really rely heavily on those community partners in doing this work. Our office can't do the work alone. We work with nonprofits and community organizations and educational institutions to make sure that these messages are spread across the state. And I'm always looking for new partners. So if you're interested in doing this work, reach out to our office. It doesn't matter if you're a big organization or small, if you focus solely on civic engagement work or have many other things that you do to serve your community, we're always looking for new partners. And then lastly, I want to remind everyone that we have an elections call center for voters to get any of their questions answered. It's up and running right now. People are on the phones right now. You can call in and get a live person on the phone anytime between now and the election. Any question that you may have about the election or voting. You can find the elections line on our website, and we will add more people on the phones as call volume increases and have extended hours so that we're really available for voters anytime they have questions. And with that, I'll hand it back to Secretary Simon.
Well, thank you to all the team members. There is no question that this election year will be among the most intense in history. The presidential candidates will likely inspire strong feelings. People will be passionate, and that's okay. We are, after all, electing the most powerful person in the United States and probably the world. I think a little passion, a little energy is called for. It's not a bad thing at all. We just want to make sure that it's channeled in the right direction, in a positive direction, in a nonviolent direction, and that's what's really important. I just want to make sure that Minnesotans know that our office is working hard with partners all over the state on all these areas we've discussed today, on physical security, cybersecurity, providing accurate information, voting outreach, and the like. Above all else, though, I just want to center this on the voters, because this is about them. It's not about any of us here. It's not about election administrators. It's about the voters, and it's about all of them, including those who are skeptical about some or even all of our election system. The system serves them as well, as do we. So this is about protecting and strengthening their freedom to vote by providing elections that are fair, accurate, honest, and secure, which is what we hope to do in 2024. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
How concerned are you about physical security at polling places, intimidation of workers? You mentioned the new law, but do you think that's going to be a real problem here this year?
Well, I would put it this way, and I want to defer to some extent to Bill as well. Pardon me. The incidents or problems in Minnesota have blessedly been limited. Not so much in other states. And I really applaud the legislature for agreeing with us that we needed to be proactive about this. We didn't want to wait until there were one or more really bad episodes in Minnesota. There have been instances of harassment, threats, or intimidation directed mostly at elections administrators, the people who do this year-round all the time, the people who work for the cities and work for the counties, less so, and almost not at all, directed towards election judges, the 30,000 people that Mr. Maeda talked about who stand up and step up every year. But we want to be cautious about that, which is why the law was passed. And as he noted, we now have extra teeth and extra penalties in the law to take care of that. I am cautiously optimistic. Our polling places overwhelmingly in Minnesota are oases of calm, I think, where people can vote in peace and have peace of mind when doing so.
Have there been any incidents yet with AI that election workers have seen and reported back to you? And you also said the piece that they've done, sort of making it a penalty before the elections, maybe before. Do you think there's more that could be done this legislative session around that?
You know, in terms of this legislative session, I would say possibly. To your earlier question, it's about AI in particular, I have not heard, maybe others on the team have, I have not heard about any AI-driven threats of that kind. It's certainly a possibility, but have not heard about that so far.
Can I ask either you or Melanie, how do you know what the language issues are in a given precinct? Does someone have to petition, for instance, to say, we've determined that we need this interpretation service?
That's where our elections team has been working with the state demographer's office. So they're using the census tract data from 2020 to figure out exactly which precincts qualify based on those certain thresholds reached. But I will add that there is also an opportunity for precincts that maybe don't reach that threshold, but think that they have enough voters that speak another language. They can have, I believe it's 20 voters petition their county, and then they can have the services also brought to them that way.
Do you know how many precincts in the state meet each of those thresholds?
We haven't gotten the precincts yet. I just had the list of counties sent to me from our elections team, but they haven't narrowed it down to precincts yet, but they're working on it with the state demographer's office.
For the primary ballots, you'd mentioned that legal marijuana now is also conducting this. Do they have a primary or do they have a candidate? And also, when people vote in the primary, you mentioned that you have to choose one party or the other. Does that information still get reported to the parties?
So we have improvement on that score. This is an issue that I'm kind of passionate about. If you recall, back in 2020, the rule then was that when the voter chose which party's ballot to take, that information went to everybody participating in the presidential nominating primary. In other words, all the parties got to see that. It wasn't public, thank goodness, in my view, but everyone got to see that. We managed, with a lot of help at the legislature, to pare that down this year, not as far as I personally would have liked to see, but real progress, so that now the only folks who get to see which ballot the voter chose is the party that the voter chose. So the argument has been that this is sort of like a sign-in sheet. If a person goes to a political party event, they wouldn't be surprised or even offended if that entity had a sign-in sheet at the door. But they might be offended, as many were in 2020, if you went to a political party event, they had a sign-in sheet, and then they just passed around the sign-in sheet to other entities. And so at least we pared it down, but that's it. It is not public, it never has been. But now, only the party of choice gets the information. It's first name and last name. That's it.
So is that in the omnibus bill?
Is Nicole around? I think so, but we can get that for you.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, that was a big issue.
Yeah.
It would have been interesting to know about while it was being considered as opposed to finding it on page 400 of the state government bill.
Yeah, no, it was discussed, for sure, but yeah, that's something that we and others, not only us, push for to continue to narrow the number of people who can see that information. I mean, my own view on that is, look, we don't have party registration in Minnesota. We're in the minority, no question. We're one of 18 states that does not, and I believe has never had, since statehood, party registration. And that's just a cultural thing for us. Minnesotans are not used to signing government documents or disclosing to the government their political affiliation. Other states are, 32 states, they're fine with that. But our political culture in Minnesota has been that people are reticent about that, and I think for good reason.
Can you talk about the challenges with the ballot not being able to change and the potential for candidates to drop out in
Yes.
this race? I mean, what advice would you give to people? I know there's a date from which they can change their ballot, but then you can't, correct?
Correct. Yeah, the drop dead date in this particular case is close of business on February 15th, which is 19 days before March 5th. That's the date by which any voter who votes absentee can claw back their ballot. If they've changed their mind for any reason, one of the reasons obviously is if their candidate dropped out of the race, which is kind of a hazard in a contest like this as opposed to a general election. It's more likely in a general election to be a change of heart, not someone wholesale dropping out of the race, which can and does now happen by the day here with presidential candidates. So that's an added layer here and might be a signal that people might want to wait to cast an absentee ballot in a presidential nominating primary contest, depending on your party or your preferences, because there's no guarantee that that candidate will still be in the race by March 5th.
Can you there were a couple changes made temporarily during COVID. One was the witness
Right.
requirement, and you've said already that that is back. You do need the witness.
Right.
What's the status of the issue about how many voters someone can assist at the ballot? That was federal legislation, or federal lawsuit. What's the status of that?
Yes, the status now is back to the original language in the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which is there is no limit on the number of people that a given individual can assist. So, for any reason in the polling place, whether that's by reason of a physical disability, whether that's by reason of English language proficiency, those are the two most common. So there's no limit. The Federal Voting Rights Act imposed no limit. Minnesota had a statute on the books that said that there was a limit, no more than 3. That was litigated, and the federal court decided that Minnesota's law conflicted with the language of the Voting Rights Act, which is something that we had argued. And so now there is no limit.
Was it changed statutorily as well, or are you relying on?
I think it was, yes, I think this last session we did actually go and make the actual change in the law books as well, so it's not just court driven.
That was page 427.
Right.
What things might you be requesting from the upcoming legislative session? What changes are you going to be asking for?
You know, we'll have more to say about that as the session approaches. I know it is approaching. We're about the, three and a half week mark, something like that. But I will tell you, mostly it's refinements to existing laws, things like language that complies with changes made to federal law, like the Electoral Count Reform Act, for example, that was made at the federal level. We're going to need some conforming changes. Some things involving residence lists at colleges and universities, things like that. So mostly just refinements to things that are already there. You may know or understand or remember that, you know, our, at least political culture here at the legislature has been to avoid making big election law changes in an election year. So the election year session has been typically a little sloopier on the election law front for that reason.
Given that the Minnesota Supreme Court agreed to hear the expedited petition for the voter restoration law, obviously the arguments are April 1st and that's after the primary. Could you confirm whether or not for those voters that are affected by the law that they will be able to vote in the
Absolutely.
primary?
Yes, I should be absolutely explicit. Here's who's eligible to vote in the presidential nominating primary, no matter what. Anyone in Minnesota who is 18 years old, resident of the state of Minnesota, a citizen of the United States of America, and not presently incarcerated. That's the standard for everyone, for sure, through at least April 1st.
Did your attorneys ask for expedited review?
Interestingly, we took no position. Our formal position was to the court that we took no position. If they wanted to do it, great. If they didn't want to do it, great. I mean, the key thing for us is clarity. And so to some extent, this is a good thing because we hope we'll get early clarity one way or another. That's the most important thing in any election, is clarity of the rules as early as possible in the election cycle. So to the extent this does that, that will be a good thing.
Did you pick the purple tie on purpose today?
Actually, truth be told, I do like to wear purple on occasions like this. I think it strikes the right tone in a number of ways.
I have one question. At the state level, do you guys have to worry about foreign interference, much like we are being hearing about with social media? Or are our elections, at least in this state, pretty secure versus foreign interference?
Well, I'll draw two questions out of that. Yes, we believe our elections are fundamentally secure. Neither I nor anyone in this business could stand up here and tell you with a straight face and honestly and sincerely that nothing bad could ever happen. That would be misleading. But are we in a good position? Do we feel that our security systems work well, that they've been tested, that they've been probed, and that they will be subject to continual testing and probing throughout the rest of this year? Yes, and there maybe Bill can add some insight as to that. And I'll call him up here in a second too, but to your first question, yes, it very much is an issue. In 2016, that's what changed everything. I think you could look at election administration in this country and divide it into two halves. Pre-2016 and post-2016. 2016 really did change everything. That's when Minnesota was one of 21 states that was targeted, whose election system was targeted by a foreign government. Fortunately, they didn't get in, the system worked, but from that day forward, all of us in this country were on notice about the possibility that foreign governments or their proxies would attempt in some way to mess with our election systems. And so we've been on guard since that time. We've had great partnerships since then with the federal government. But yes, foreign election interference is very much on our radar screen. Bill, do you want to say just a little bit more?
Yeah, I think what I would add is if you think about the objective of a foreign adversary, it might well be to try to sow mistrust regarding U.S. elections. So to do that, they would be seeking out the weakest link anywhere in the country they can find it. And so whether they have a specific interest in influencing Minnesota's elections, that's difficult to assess. But looking for that weak link, whether it's here or another state, so that they can then use it to foment mistrust through social media or other methods, that really, I think, is the risk of that. To the Secretary's point, we continue to constantly look at ways to keep our own system secure, work with our county and local partners to do all that they can to keep their system secure. It's a continual battle for all of those reasons.
Do the threats look any different right about now versus this time 4 years ago?
Well, I think we talked a little bit about artificial intelligence and how that may, we expect to creep into some of these types of activities. That's a new wrinkle. Cyber threat is constantly evolving. Adversaries, cyber criminals, foreign and domestic, always finding new ways to take advantage of vulnerabilities in our system. So in that sense, yes, we're 4 years further down the line of maturity of cyber threats. We're 4 years down the line of being smarter on how to defend against them also. And so I think that's one other point I would make with regards to AI. Artificial intelligence has sort of this sky is falling feeling to it right now. It's easy to forget that the good guys get to use AI too. And when we talk to some of our largest technology partners, they are at the forefront of putting great resources behind leveraging AI for the right reasons, to defend networks, to defend information. And so it's important to keep that in mind as well.
Are you able yet to tell us who that foreign actor was from the 2016 cycle?
Is it public?
I think it is.
Yeah, I think it's been said to have been Russia. That was probably no surprise, had been rattling doorknobs, as the secretaries like to allude to. But without naming others, they're not alone. There are others that are interested in those same objectives of leveraging elections, vulnerabilities to sow distrust.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Thanks so much. Okay, thanks all.